time for another podcast by George. Straight talk, straight from the heartland, that'll have you say, by George, I think he's got it. Now, here's George.
Hello, hi, how are you? And welcome to another podcast by George. Well, you know, when we do the podcast oftentimes, particularly when we get one that I personally really like, I always say that we'll circle back. We'll come back to this individual, and that's what we're doing today. We've got a friend of the podcast, Pramila Malik, on, and I wanted to get back with her because she's everything that I really admire as far as politics and the news of the day is concerned. She's a mother of four. She's an activist. She's a progressive. She's kind of got something other than a Midwest perspective because she's out there in New York State, and she's one of the, I think one of the world's foremost authorities on climate crisis, and in particular, the candidates and the political process that goes along with it. Hello, Pramila.
Thank you. You were very generous in your introduction.
Well, thanks for coming on. And also, you're one that not only talks it like I do, you're somebody that walks it because you're out walking the line with a sign oftentimes, and you're also involved in politics. You've run for the state house there in New York, and I mean, you get after it. So I really admire that and really appreciate it. But, you know, we just had this most recent debate here in Des Moines, and I was kind of struck by the fact that a lot of the debate itself, and particularly the follow-up news coverage, was devoted to this dust up between Warren and Bernie, and not enough attention, I think, is being given to the climate crisis. Because, folks, and like I say on the podcast, some people may disagree, but I believe it's going to kill us all if we don't get on it, if we don't do something. Time is nigh. We've got to get with the program. And Pramila, last time we talked, Jay Inslee was still in the race, and we were talking a little bit about him. And what I was really interested in, and shows your insightfulness on this, you saw some baggage that Jay Inslee had that some other people didn't have on the climate crisis. And how are you viewing the candidates right now as far as their perspective on climate's concerned?
Well, I agreed with you. I think the climate crisis is probably the single most important issue of the 2020 presidential campaign. And, every presidential campaign is a life and death campaign because the policy decisions made at that level really do impact us, whether it's on healthcare or housing or war, or energy policy and climate policy. But in this particular moment in human history, when we are looking at the, extinction of all living species on Earth, beginning with humanity, I think that it's pretty clear that this is the most important election of our lifetime. That because we've failed to address this issue, even knowing about it for decades. My father was a physicist. He talked about this in the 70s. But for decades, we've known about this emerging crisis, and the government under both political parties willfully ignored it. And we're at a moment now where this is our last opportunity to do something to avert absolute, cataclysmic collapse of all living species. This is it. This is our last chance. And, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being hyperbolic. I speak to scientists all the time. My work has allowed me to communicate with some of the best climate scientists in the world, and they're very shy about speaking about this in public for a couple of reasons. Number one, they're afraid of being assaulted by the industry. They're afraid of being accused of being political, and they're afraid of sounding, an alarm that might cause public panic. But I assure you that privately, all of these scientists are panicking right now. The events that are occurring decades earlier than even the best climate scientists had anticipated and expected. And the reason is because none of these scientists that have been studying this for decades expected the advent of fracking. Fracking, which just kind of emerged on the U.S. marketplace in the last decade has been a complete game changer for the climate. It is singularly facilitating and accelerating climate collapse. And that's where I come in. That's the work that I've been doing. I've been fighting fracked gas, fracking infrastructure for over a decade. And sadly, I've been fighting both political parties. But anyway, to circle back to your question, all of the candidates have a little tiny bit of baggage. Well, let me rephrase that. All of the candidates have some baggage. The candidates with the absolute least baggage, the best record on the climate, are Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard.
That's my crew.
Yeah, in my opinion, these are the only two candidates. Let me repeat, the only two candidates that can be trusted to seriously address the climate crisis, who understand the magnitude, who can't be swayed by political interest or lobbyists or, and there's political interest on the left and the right, by the way. And all of the candidates are kind of flexing their climate credibility muscles because they understand that it's an important issue for voters. Voters across the political spectrum recognize that there is a real climate crisis and it is impacting their daily lives now, whether you're a poor family living next to a polluting power plant, whether you're a farmer whose crops are completely out of whack right now because of dramatic changes in the climate and droughts, or whether you're a wealthy homeowner with a seaside property. Everyone's being impacted by the climate crisis. So across the political spectrum, people do want something done about this, and they want something serious done about this. So every candidate has to, claim that, they're going to, address the issue head on. They understand that people are going to vote on this issue.
That's great. I hope they do. And to reinforce a couple of points that you made there, I just had one of the world's foremost authorities and climate scientists on Basev Sen, and he said, because I'm very curious about that, what you were talking about. These climate scientists are always very conservative in the way that they present their data because they say it could be worse. It could be much worse. It could be occurring much more quickly than what they're saying. Everybody just kind of blows by that. But I asked Basev Sen, I said, is it too late yet? And the way that he put it was, on some of these things, and maybe they don't know exactly what they are. Yeah, some of these things are permanent right now. I mean, we've already missed the boat on some of these things, and that's shocking and alarming, and people need to be aware of that. And I follow you, and I follow the Door Show and a lot of the progressive folks on the internet. And one of the things that I'm really coming to realize and understand, when you mentioned that fracking is so important. Well, fracking does not get the coverage and attention that it deserves from political candidates and from the news media and from anyone. And it's that important. Why not? Well, it's because some of these political candidates are complicit. I mean, at the very least, they fiddled while Rome burned. And at the worst, they played an active role in allowing this fracking to occur. And it is killing the planet. And people that some folks think of liberal, and people that they really, Barack Obama, I mean, his fingerprints are all over this fracking problem within the climate crisis, right?
Absolutely. And, it deeply saddens me because I campaigned for Barack Obama in the state of Pennsylvania with my 4 little tiny kids in tow. They were really tiny at the time. They were 4 to 10 or something like that. And we went door to door campaigning for Barack Obama in 2008. And 2012, he sold my family and my children under the bus by promoting fracking and fracked gas, because this is how I got involved in this fight. A pipeline company put a compressor station a half mile from my house, quarter mile from my house actually. And my children started getting sick. My son developed asthma. I developed asthma. My daughter started getting nosebleeds, which are linked to formaldehyde and benzene poisoning. So, and we brought this to the attention of every authority we could, including the Council on Environmental Quality, at that time President Obama's own agency. And, nobody really did anything at all. Nobody cared about the human health impact in the face of, enormous profits for industry. Nobody wanted to get in the way of profits for industry. But, that commitment to frack gas is probably will go down in history as one of the most fatal decisions made by any administration.
Yeah.
And what I always say is that climate truth lies in the crack between climate denial on the right, but climate deception on the left. So you ask, like, why have these politicians been fiddling their thumb? It's because the liberal portion of the climate fight, they create all kinds of deceptive narratives. So fracked gas was actually peddled by environmental groups and many of these same politicians as a bridge fuel.
Yes.
It was peddled as cleaner burning than coal.
I've heard Klobuchar say that just recently.
Yes.
I mean, she used that exact terminology.
Yeah, and it's fraudulent. It's absolutely fraudulent. It's wrong information. The science has been clear since about 2012. The science has been unequivocally clear that methane is worse for the environment. IPCC Interpanel, a governmental agency on climate change, came out with a report in 2012, and we've been citing this report since 2012 that said that methane had 80 to 100 times the global warming impact as CO2. Now we know that it's actually 100 plus times the global warming impact because of leakage, because from the time you extract till the time it burns, methane it's the physics of gas. Methane is always leaking. And because of that, methane emissions in the United States, in North America, the methane emissions globally have doubled in the last decade. And more than half of that, scientists say, are coming from North America, likely due to fracking. There was a Harvard study about that recently. Again, I'm not really an expert, but what I am is somebody willing to speak the brutal facts and sound the alarm, which people are often scared to do because it means not only going up against industry and climate deniers, but it also means going against progressives and the neoliberal environmentalists who peddle these false narratives.
Well, you're great at it. Good on you. I appreciate everything that you do. And people need to pay attention to fracking. So I hope maybe that we can sound the alarm a little bit here on this podcast. Okay, before I lose you, because my podcast is always limited in time, let's take a quick spin through these candidates, because a lot of people are unaware of their positions when it comes, to fracking for sure, but even the climate change. Joe Biden's on the debate stage, and he wants to tell everybody about the key role that he played in climate change legislation, decades ago. What's your take on Joe Biden's stance on climate crisis?
Yeah, he was part of Obama's all of the above energy policy, which really translated into total commitment to fracking. And so in 2015, the entire country began consuming more power from fracked gas than any other fuel source. And that was a monumental shift in our energy policy in the wrong direction. We should have been moving to hydro, wind, solar, and nuclear still has to be on the table because it's the only baseload carbon-free source of energy. But we committed 100% to frack gas at that point. So he was part of that. Biden, terrible record.
Let's grade these folks. It's not going to be anything precise, but A to F. We'll just take a quick spin through here. Give Biden give him a grade.
F.
An F.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's move on. Let's go to here's an unknown. This guy is really popular in Iowa, but honest to God, I can't tell you what any of his policy positions are. But do you know anything about Pete Buttigieg and his proposals on climate crisis?
Pete Buttigieg says that he would ban fracking. I think I'm not 100% sure. I think he said that recently. But again, look, if he's taking PAC money, if he's beholden to big moneyed interests, if he's part of the establishment, he's not going to do anything to stop fracking. And I can guarantee you in writing. So I'd give him like a D.
Well, and a couple of notes about Buttigieg. He was a part of that McKinsey consulting firm, and his client list will make you. I mean, my God, it'll make you sick to see the people
I didn't look at it, but I'm sure there are fossil fuel interests.
Yes, unbelievable. And the other thing about Buttigieg that I really can't get by. I mean, he doesn't speak very specifically. He doesn't say very much. He's what I call a intelligence spook. He's a former Navy intelligence officer. He can't tell you anything about that. Why? Because it's secret. When it comes to the McKinsey consulting firm and the work that he did there, he can't tell you anything about that. Why? Because he signed an NDA. It's secret. I mean, I don't want to be uplifting and electing people to the presidency of the United States that have this kind of secrecy connected to him. And of course, he is hooked up financially. I mean, this guy is backed by the intelligence community financially and operationally. That's Pete Buttigieg. Okay, so let's move on. Well, we talked about this dust-up between Warren and Bernie, which made all the news. How do you look at Elizabeth Warren's energy policies?
So I would give her probably maybe a C+, C+ to B-. She, first of all, the pipeline that I'd been fighting that went near my house, it connects to a pipeline known as the Spectra AIM pipeline. And that goes right through to the state of Massachusetts. And also the company that I had been fighting that was building this power plant, they have a headquarters in Massachusetts. So we tried on numerous occasions to reach out to Elizabeth Warren and get help to stop the Spectra AIM pipeline. There was a compressor station proposed for a community in Roxbury in Massachusetts. Compressor stations have enormous health consequences that we had documented in Minisync. Again, she did very little to nothing to stop it. We tried reaching out to her about holding the FERC, using the FERC nomination to hold FERC accountable for their abuse of power and authority and, rampant approval of pipelines. Again, we got nothing. So, I actually think a B- is generous. I think it's got to be more like a C+. And I don't, totally perplexed that she was even under consideration for a Sunrise endorsement.
Yeah, that was surprising. So,
I'm sorry. One other really important thing is that in the 2018 Ohio's governor's race, she endorsed pro-fracker Cordray over anti-fracker Dennis Kucinich. And Dennis Kucinich pledged on day one to ban fracking and to prosecute fracking companies for criminal conduct. And, that was an extremely powerful policy position, a bold policy position. And, her endorsement in the primary was highly inappropriate, but, it was supporting a pro-fracker. And that race was extremely important for environmentalists in the United States because Ohio is like ground zero for fracking in the United States. Much of the gas that you see spread around the country comes either from Ohio or Pennsylvania, and all the silica that they use comes from Ohio. So that would have been an enormous, enormous environmental victory. And she interfered in that race. And that's highly questionable, and it served the interest of industry. And I think I'm lower than C. When I think about that, actually, I want to go lower than C, but I'll give her a C because she's progressive on some other issues.
Well, we're working our way to C- or D back of the class. Yeah, Buttigieg's issue is he has a secretive background, and with Warren, it's she has a little trouble with the truth, she's going to be taken apart by Trump if she were the nominee on that Native American thing, getting that scholarship at Harvard, law school.
Yeah, I don't. Go ahead. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
No, I was just also going to say that she also claimed that her father was a janitor, and her own brother came out here recently and said, that ain't true. She came out and said that she was the first, the only woman to be nursing and pass the New Jersey bar. And the New Jersey bar came out and said, we've been around since 1895 giving law exams. We don't poll people as to whether or not they're nursing. we have no idea whether or not that's true. So that appears to be entirely made up. And then you got this dust up with Bernie. And I'm just telling you, based on reporting and knowledge of Bernie's career and candidacy, that ain't true, folks. What that claim that came out of her campaign, which wasn't even directly tied to her, she didn't say it was some of staffers or some unnamed sources or whatever. That just ain't so. So you got to tread carefully when it comes to Elizabeth Warren. And why would you believe what she has to say about the climate crisis? What we talked about earlier on Klobuchar, I got a feeling she's going to be down at the bottom of the class. And she's got pipeline issues in her own state, right?
Yep. And so did Inslee when he was in the race. He supported a frack gas LNG port until he entered the race, and then suddenly became against it. So yeah, these people are duplicitous, and they'll say what they need to say in order to win, which is why a candidate's rhetoric is utterly meaningless to me. The only thing that matters is their record.
Well, I know you like Bernie and Tulsi, and I do too. I mean, do you give any credence at all to the pay-to-play guy, Tom Steyer? Does he have anything for you on climate crisis?
No, I think he's I think he's a candidate designed to usurp the climate vote. He's been funding some climate events, but they're very careful in their wording, in their verbiage. They're like, oh, we have to fight big oil, or we have to fight big coal. Well, guess what that leaves out? It leaves out the elephant in the room, which is gas. And he's heavily vested in gas, fracked gas especially. He used to be heavily invested in coal and oil too, claims that he's divested from them, but he's pretty silent on gas. And I suspect those gas investments are not only still active and still present, but I think that that's the reason why he's there to usurp the climate vote. Remember, the gas was all peddled under the name of fighting climate change. The power plant that I've been fighting that is poisoning my children and my community was built with an NRDC endorsement, claiming that it's being built to fight climate change. Yeah. So yeah, he's part of that deception.
Well, before we get out of here, we got to talk a little bit about my favorites, and it sounds like yours too, Bernie and Tulsi. But even Bernie and Tulsi, it doesn't sound like they're going to get any A pluses or maybe even straight A's from you. There's a little bit of baggage with everybody you mentioned.
I mean, so I really like Bernie and Tulsi a lot, and I think they're principled candidates, and that's what matters to me. And they do have a record of being bold, not taking PAC money, standing up to industry, standing up to big industry. A big moneyed interest. And those are the ingredients that we need in order to get effective climate policy and energy policy. I think they've been misadvised by certain advisors, and I think they don't, I know, for example, Josh is a friend of mine. I know he advises Bernie, and he's very strong on fracking. In 2016, he was like, yeah, I'm going to ban fracking. Tulsi also, right from 2016, was on board with banning fracking. So they're great on banning fracking. They're a little weak on nuclear power. I think they don't support nuclear power. And I have to be very honest, I don't really support nuclear power, but speaking with the scientists, the reality is the reality. The facts on the ground are that that's the only baseload source of power that we have right now at this moment. What we need to do is shut down, build wind and solar plants and hydropower plants, and then shut down the nuclear power plants. But the very last thing we need to be doing is building frack gas power plants, and they need to be the first things to go. And before I wrap up, so yeah, Tulsi also voted for, I think she voted for HR 1616, which was a bill to export frack gas to Europe. Again, I don't know why she voted for that bill. I'm waiting for an answer from her team, so I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. So I'm going to still give both of those candidates an A, because again, I believe they're principled. I believe they'll stand up, and they will act with the urgency that science demands. I believe that. Bloomberg, F, in my opinion, one of the worst climate criminals there is, right there with Biden, because he plugged New York City, the second largest consumer of gas in the world, of power in the world, to frack gas dependency. Did it very systematically. And that has been, again, that decision alone has been cataclysmic for the environment and for the climate. So I give him a big fat F as well.
Well, that's great. My God, thanks for coming on with us, Pramila Malek. I mean, she is our climate crisis clarion out there in the state of New York. And well, before we close shop here, I saw that you just started a new Facebook group. You're a part of organizations. You're an activist. What groups or web pages or sites or what can you promote here and tell people? How do they hook up and get in touch?
So Protect Orange County is my main community organization page where we post a lot about our fight against this power plant company. By the way, the single biggest frac gas developer in the country. They build these power plants near every major metropolitan city in the country, LA, Chicago, DC, everywhere. And they were one of their CEOs or executives was just convicted for criminal activity related to the power plant I was fighting. Well, we could talk about that some other time, but they're a big player. They're a big player, and the guy's father was vice president, was chair of fundraising for the DNC for decades. So this is a company that is entrenched with the Democratic Party establishment, which is one of the reasons why they fought me so much. They did what they did to Bernie, they did to me in 2018, but
yes,
we can talk about that some other time. I think that, this vote is critical. And if you care about the climate, Bernie and Tulsi, and I'm really hoping for a Bernie and Tulsi ticket.
Me too. That's a great stopping point. That's what I want to tell everybody.
I think that would be an unbeatable ticket for so many reasons.
Well, it's very simple. It's you can do the math on a matchbook cover. They one of the reasons, like it or not, because of what happened to Bernie in 2016 and the way that he got screwed by the DNC, and all about that. Pramila Malik does. There are Bernie or bust people out there that they're not voting for anybody but Bernie. They're a huge segment of the Democratic Party bloc. All right, so you got that. You got people that are only going to vote for Bernie, and the other part of it is if you're a DNC type person, if you try to go out there and get a nominee without that Bernie vote, you're going to lose. Hello, Hillary Clinton. It already happened in 2016. Yeah. So if they would just find some way to support and promote Bernie's candidacy, but they can't because of the donor class that supports the DNC. But if they could do that, if they could bring their moderate contingent, their money and their machine to the Bernie people, the population, they could win in 2020. And remember now, they're telling us Trump has to go down at all cost. They'll do anything to get Trump out of office. Okay, why not do that?
Anyone but Bernie.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they're saying. Anybody but Bernie? Are you kidding me? In this time, in this climate crisis, in this age of Donald Trump, anybody but Bernie? What the hell? Come on, folks. All right, we got to wrap up. Pramila, we're coming back, right? We can talk again soon?
Anytime. I love talking to you.
I do too. It's great. She's a friend, folks. She's got boots on the ground. She's the real deal. She walks it like she talks it. That's Pramila Malik checking in again. We'll come back to her again very soon. But for right now, that's another podcast. Bye, George.
Bye. Thank you so much.
That's great, Pramila.